just maybe you can walk us through your story and while we're here and what we're talking about and what you guys went through.
That's you.
Yeah, I know. James, he was a great kid, but I won't go through all of that. It was a Saturday night, July 17th, 2004. The night before, his friend had spent the night over at our house. And that night, he was going to spend the night over at his friend's house. So, all cool. Monica's a flight attendant based out of Newark, New Jersey. Uh-huh. So she's in Newark, and that evening she's going to be flying to London. And the family where he was going to be spending the night at their house, the wife was out of town as well. So the dad and the kids and James are eating dinner with grandma. Mm-hmm. And they're like, hey, we're eating dinner with grandma. You want to come over? I was like, sweet. My other two kids were out someplace, so we all had dinner together.
Right.
And then we all left, and they were going to go. Actually, they decided to go to our house because we did have a pool table that people played on.
Right, we talked about this. Right,
we did, and so they were going to go to our house. I was going to do some shopping and then come back. I go to the store, buy some groceries. I'm on my way back home. I get a phone call, and it's from the dad, and he says, "Brooks, there was a bad accident, and James is hurt really bad." Oh. And he told me where they were, and so I was now speeding to get to that point.
Was the dad calling from that location? Was he on location?
He was on location.
Okay.
He actually was calling his son was driving behind him, following him to our house.
Okay.
And James was in.
So he was in front of the car that was driving your son.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. So I get this phone call, and so I'm rushing. But what's weird is because I'm thinking James is a really tough kid.
Right.
He's probably fine. You think he's hurt bad, but that's my mind. I'm like, I'm sure he's okay. But I'm bolting my way there. So I get to the accident, to the place where it was. I see this car like in a ditch. I go over to the car and I see my son James in the back seat, slumped over in the back. And so I just put my hand on his back and I said, "Hey James, it's Dad. I'm here." And I realized as I had my hand on his back that I did not feel him breathing.
Right.
I didn't feel a heartbeat. Got there before the paramedics, but the paramedics were there a minute after me, right as I'm there talking to James.
So you arrived on scene before anybody had any help had arrived.
I did. So the paramedic comes over, and he basically, I think to occupy me, he says, "Can you hold my flashlight for me?" I was like, "Sure." So I'm holding the flashlight, and he's doing this to James, checking for a pulse. But I watched him as he did this. And then he kept moving.
Oh, he moved his hands.
Because he couldn't find a pulse. And he's looking for one. So then it was, "Sir, can you back up so that we can..." Absolutely. So I back up. I get out of the way. I'm praying. I'm calm. I'm watching them take care of... his friend was thrown from the car, so they're
he wasn't wearing a seatbelt.
Another boy over there. There were 4 in the car. The dad of the 2 boys, this is moments later, is... just kind of hysterical, understandably so. Mm-hmm. His kids were both in a car that just got into an accident.
And pretty bad.
And the paramedic says to him, "Look, you see that truck right there? That's where your son is. And you see that there's people in there and there's a lot of activity. When you see activity, that means they're working on him. He's going to be okay."
Right.
So at that point, I looked over at the truck where my son was.
Oh, no.
And I realized that there was no activity going on. So I start walking over. I'm making a beeline to that truck to see what's going on. And I don't know whether it's paramedic, the police officers that were there, but all of us, they're yelling at me like, "Sir, stop. Sir, you need to not, sir." And I get it. They're probably talking about how we're going to tell this guy. I walk over to the truck, look in. There's nobody in there except for my son with the seat pulled all the way over his head. And in my mind, I was like, I've seen enough movies. I know what this means. Mm-hmm. He's gone. And I crumbled. I just fell to the ground and crumbled. And I thought, he's gone. He's gone. Now I'm into full what do I do now mode.
Right.
My wife is on an airplane on her way to London. What am I going to do there? I mean, one of the cops actually said, he said, "You just need to wait till she comes home to tell her." I'm like, "That's in 3 days. I'm not doing that." I'm like, okay, my two other boys, one of them was at a friend's house locally. The other one was at a camp, a church camp
in
Alabama.
Clearwater.
Clearwater, which was amazing because my family lived in Clearwater.
So you're able to get some family around.
I'm on the phone calling up the youth pastor. My brother's going to come pick up Joey. I call up my brother. I need you to pick up Joey. Here's the guy's number. Call him, find out where he is. James just died in a car accident. I call up. My kids didn't have cell phones yet at that time. They were fairly new. I did. I call up the house where my other son was to talk to him. But the guy whose house he's at answers the phone, and I'm like, Kevin, James just died in a car wreck. You guys need to come here. I'm like, but don't let Ricky drive. You make sure you drive him here.
How far apart? I mean, Ricky's your oldest.
Yes.
Joey, and then James, your youngest.
Correct.
What were the age differences between your three children?
At the time, they were 13, 16, and 19. So 13-year-old.
So every 3 years.
Yeah, 13-year-old is in the back of a truck. 16-year-old's at Clearwater at a camp. 19-year-old's at his friend's house. Have to go to the hospital. They give me a couple cards and say, this is what we're going to do. You need to go to the hospital. Go to the hospital, and I get there, and there's a dozen people there already that I know. I didn't even know how the word got out so quickly, but there's a dozen people at the hospital. And I'm dying. As a matter of fact, Garrett, if I remember correctly, your dad drove me to the hospital. Ross Cooper drove me to the hospital, and he was having bad knee troubles and stuff like that. So the first thing I said was to somebody else, can you drive the car and park it so that he doesn't have to walk? And then I looked at people and I was like, I need you to pray. I need you to pray, because things like this make people get mad at God and turn people off. And why would you let this happen to this family? Why would you take this great boy? And I was like, I need you to pray that doesn't happen. That people will somehow get closer to God because of this, not that people will turn away from God. That was my heart. Then I go into the hospital. You have to go into the room where nobody wants to go in to have some doctor say your son is dead. He arrived dead on arrival. I need you to sign these papers. And and it's rough. Actually, on the way we dropped Ricky off at a house, I'm sorry. Then I come out of the hospital, and it's a whole nother group of people. And I see two of James's teachers. And I just lost it because everybody else that was there was people that knew me. They were my connection, or they were a connection with Ricky or with Joey. Then I see these two people in there, James's connection.
Yeah.
And but I just said the same thing. I need you guys to pray. We can't have this be a thing that turns people away from God, because it's not God's fault. I go over to Coop's house. Ricky's there. Can I spend the night? 100%. There's already 40 kids over at the house.
Right.
Just grieving with Ricky. And I'm like, he's in the best place possible. You stay here. Again, as I'm leaving, then I see James's drum teacher, and I fall apart again because it's anytime it was a connection with James. Yeah. And Tim Elrod, and I just grabbed him and hugged him for a while, and then I went home, and I'm thinking, what do I do now? How do I communicate with Monica? I'm not going to tell her on the phone.
She's on a flight.
She's on a plane.
I was already
from New
in
York,
the air.
New York to
New York
London.
to London.
New York to London. You're in the air.
Yeah.
Crossing the Atlantic.
Yeah.
I was over the Atlantic when.
Monica, years ago, and I've got a few questions out of this book that you wrote called The Club, and I thought it's. Oh man, I've got to pause for a second myself.
You pause. Let me finish a little bit of the story, and then you can.
Yeah.
I'm trying to figure out what to do. How am I going to communicate this with Monica? I had helped her a lot of times with her scheduling and things, so I was very savvy. And I think you weren't supposed to do this, but basically I could go on to United or Continental at that time, Continental's website as Monica. Mm-hmm. And so I looked up her flight, what hotel she was staying at, who was the lead flight attendant. And I call the hotel. I wait until I know that they've landed. They're at the hotel now. It's 3 a.m. for me. I call the hotel and I say, I need to speak to this person. They connect me to that person's room. the lead flight attendant. And I said, my name is Brooks Everett. You don't know me. You just flew with Monica. You probably just met her. I was like, our son just died a couple hours ago. And you cannot tell her, but I need you to get her home on the first flight and tell her just there's an emergency, a family emergency. I will meet her in Newark, New Jersey. You can't tell her what happened. Mm-hmm. Tell her I'll meet her in Newark. I'm dying.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And I said, and don't have her call me back. Just tell her 20 minutes later I get a call.
Sure.
From London. It's Monica. And she's thinking it's her dad.
Yes.
But she's like, Brooks, what happened? What happened? I'm like, I'm not going to tell her over the phone that our boy's gone.
But you could hardly speak. All I heard was, it was like a frog. His voice was so raw.
For a guy that speaks for a living,
understand him
speaks
without words.
I said, what happened?
Like, I can't tell you. Just
and he couldn't even talk. He just said, come
meet me in Newark.
home. And I thought, okay, it's not my dad. It's one of the kids.
Yeah.
So then I got to get to Newark. I can do that. I go on all the time. I would go on, book myself on a flight. Every flight was full.
Yeah.
There was no room. And I would be flying non-rev. They're not going to do that. I'm like, Monica's always talking about the camaraderie inside Continental Airlines and how they work together. I'm just going to the airport. I go to the airport, go to the gate agents. I probably look horrible. I haven't slept, all night. I just lost my son. I get to the gate, and I'm like, I tell him, my wife's a flight attendant. She just flew to London. Our son died last night. I've got to get to Newark. Can you help me? And I'm probably talking like this,
Yeah,
And so now these ladies they're bawling. I'm a wreck. And they're bawling. They're like, I don't know everything. I said, I know. I said, anything you can do for me. They said, hold on a minute. So they go to the back and I don't know, talk to a supervisor or something. And they come back and they're like, we are so sorry. We have to ask you this. Do you have anything to prove that? And I get that, you can't just, do you have anything? And I reached into my wallet and I was like, this is the police officer's card that he gave me, his business card. This is the coroner's card that they gave me. Is this okay?
Yeah.
And now they're falling apart. I'm falling apart. And they got me on a flight. So, and that means they had to bump a paying passenger, to get me on a flight. And they did. So I
flew to London.
I flew to Newark.
Newark. I'm sorry.
She's coming from London to Newark. So I fly to Newark. Continental had 2 employees meeting me when I got off the plane.
Wow.
I didn't even know. So they communicated somehow. They have 2 employees, and they're like, Mr. Everett, we are here to help you with whatever you need help with. Monica's flight isn't going to be here for another couple hours. We have a room that you can stay in. We have food for you if you need food. We have drinks, whatever you need. We are here. And I'm just like, oh my gosh,
Yes.
This is amazing. They said, do you think you're going to need anything for Monica? I was like, we're going to need a wheelchair. She won't be able to walk. She was a wreck, and I knew it. And they instead got us one of those little carts and met us, took me on the cart. We met Monica at the plane. She got off before all the passengers. They got her on. She was bad. She didn't even know what happened, and it was bad. And she's saying, just tell me it's not the baby. Just tell me it's not the baby.
So it's like a mother's intuition, and that's what I was going to say. I read your book years ago. I read your book. This is actually a new copy because I've moved like 6 times since then. But and these are really your lamentations.
Lamentations,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And you describe in your book, when you go into great detail, this story that Brooks just shared. You named this book The Club. And I want to read the back of it because it says, to those who understand, no explanation is necessary. To those who do not, no explanation will suffice. This book is for those who have loved and lost. If you have ever lost someone close to you, then this book is written for you in mind. The desire of the authors of the words may somehow give comfort and understanding to those who have suffered this devastation. If you know someone has suffered a great loss, you may find some understanding in this book that will help you to comfort and minister to them. The words written in this book are not counsel, but the lamentations of a mother.
End of story.
who deeply loved her son. What's interesting, it's called the club because it's the club you never want to be a part of. You know, I have a best friend, Joe, who's been on the phone, been on this show before several times, and gosh, I've known him forever, but Joe and I went to church since like 4th grade, you know, best friends. And we were at a birthday dinner for myself, and his brother was on the way to his bachelor party 2 weeks before his wedding, and someone entered the expressway on the wrong way. And so they had a head-on collision, and his brother was killed instantly before his wedding. And his mother is a writer, and she hasn't written a book called The Club, but she has mentioned the war, and it's so unique because I'd read your book before. And Jay passed away, young man as well, but certainly out of college and a working adult, but before he was married.
Yeah.
And but she talks about being in a club.
Wow.
And nobody else gets it.
Exactly.
Nobody else gets it. And I thought that was really a powerful name. There's a section in here that I wanted to ask you about. I mean, it's called Mighty Warriors. And it says, there are very few that have walked where I have walked, the valley of the shadow of death. It is a dark place full of obstacles so jagged and deadly that not walk correctly could be certain death. The place is dark. There is no concept of time, day or night. There's no direction, no sign of where to go or how to survive it. The air is filled heavy with sadness. Moans can be heard from afar. Strange chanting can be heard in the distance, but I could not make it out any clearer words. Grief weighed on me heavily that it tired me so. The sadness, if not careful, will break your heart as it did mine. It goes on in here that but some point you had to have, I mean, it was a battle within as your lamentations and your writing this chapter, this mighty warrior chapter. How did you get through that moment? Because it's not a moment. A moment is actually the wrong word. I need to back up and apologize because that is the wrong word. It is a moment that happened that then sent shockwaves into your future.
Oh.
And your family's future.
And we're still suffering.
Sure.
We're still suffering. If you read the chapter of the Mighty Warriors,
yeah.
I'm describing this era or moments in time where I felt I was enclosed in a bubble, and I heard people chattering. I heard things and moans and cries, and I'm going through this dark valley, and I can't see anything, and I'm tired, and I'm hungry, and I'm angry, and I'm going through this dark, as if I was climbing a mountain, going through this valley all by myself, and I'm hearing things. And when I start to come out of it, when I feel like I completely collapse, I feel as though someone lifted me. And then as I come to, I realize that the whispers and the screams and the groans were the prayers of my friends and family.
Mm-hmm. Those warriors lifting you through.
It was them that carried me through. It was their prayers, but to me it was such a dark place. I just heard screams and yells and anger, and I don't speak very well, but I can write it.
You're doing really good.
I just had to write it down of just picture yourself going through a dark mountain pass in the dark, and that's how it felt. And I was very angry at God, and it took me such a long time to get over it.
I've said it before, and you know it. He can take it.
Love. I was so angry, but love was the answer. And I know it sounds trite, but I was at the point where, talking about stages of grief, where angry, but I became, remember when I was crying so much and they had to put me to sleep all the time because they said I was going to die. And because every time I woke up, I was crying, and they couldn't stop me from crying. And then I went into this numb time, a numbness period, where people came and brushed my teeth and brushed my hair, and said, "Take another breath." Mm-hmm. And it was the love that cracked that anger and that I felt. But that passage of the journey, every strange sound I heard through the darkness, because I couldn't see anything, was
the prayers
of my friends and family. And the person who was carrying me was my husband, because I don't know, he is the real thing. He's the solid thing.
He is the real thing. There is no doubt about it. Brooks Everett is the real deal.
And I don't know where he got it. Well, I do know. The Lord gave him the strength to carry me through. Yeah. I mean, he carried me through the darkness and brought me to a place where people took care of me. And I don't know how in the world he did it, but I know that it was through the Lord, through God's strength made him. And I always call him Superman, because